Everybody's happy, everybody's cheering, everybody is excited about the vision that you've just cast for them, and almost everybody is on board and ready to pursue this new work that you've brought up or you've brought to their attention. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, the inevitable hits. Resistance, resistance, resistance. So we said last week, resistance means you're moving, but resistance also wants to pull you back, and you have to push against resistance to find any kind of real forward motion. And that's what I want to talk about today, what it takes to maintain momentum and forward motion in the vision that you've cast. Hi, I'm Pastor Will, and this is the For Real Life and Godliness podcast, the podcast that takes the Word of God and puts it down into the grit of your real life where you can actually use it. I apologize, I'm a little sick today, so my voice may be a little weird, a little wonky, but we'll see if we can get through this and carry on with our study of leadership from Nehemiah right after this. It's interesting that today, of all days, would be the day I'd talk about grit, or the ability to stick to it when you don't feel like it, or when all the resistance of the things around you, inside of you, and even far beyond you and close to you, everywhere, that there's resistance pushing you back or trying to get you to quit. Today I did not. I had a conversation with a couple of buddies who came in here a little while ago and came in the office and just were chatting for a little bit, and I told them, I was like, I'm trying to will myself to make this podcast because I really don't feel like doing it today. And I don't at all. I have so many things going on at the moment. It would have been easier for me to just, say, hey, I'm not going to make one this week. I have midterms this week. I have some messages I need to write. I have some work I need to do personally in different areas, and then I don't feel well. I'm sick. I got this head cold thing going on, and just did not want to make this video at all. But you have to break through those kind of barriers if you're going to be consistent. And with these kind of things, the worst thing you can possibly do is be inconsistent. So I'm here. I don't know if my voice will sound like trash as you listen to it today. Hopefully I'll be able to get through it without sounding too awful. But we want to talk about grit and sticking to it, because, as I just said, if you want to be successful in something, you have to be able to stick to it even when there's resistance in your way. And no matter what the resistance is, even if it's something that sounds logical, like I don't have a good voice today because my nose is like doing this weird thing back here, and no one wants to hear that, so just don't do it today. Or you're tired because you didn't sleep well last night, or you have all these other things to do. But you have to push through those kinds of things. And Nehemiah, of all people, is another perfect example, again, today, of grit, of stick-to-itiveness, if that's a word, I think it is. And we see that last week, he gets down where the people are on their level, shows humility, shows empathy, and also gives them vision and calls them from, he understands that they are in the dirt and they're in the rubble of this catastrophe that has happened to Jerusalem and Judea and all this stuff. He understands it. He says, look, you can see where we all are right now. And then he calls them beyond it and says, come with me, join me in my quest, and help us rebuild these walls, and so that we will no longer have the issue that we currently have. And that was a huge task. It was actually, it was something that should have already been done and had not been done because of how huge the task was. And yet, in this little short verse of a speech that Nehemiah gives, you can see how impactful it was. I mean, he says like 2 sentences, I think, 2 or 3 sentences worth of words, but it was because of who he was and the fact that he was down there in the rubble with them, right? He shouldn't have been there. There's no reason for him to have left his plush job over in Shushan the palace with the Medes and Persians and all that kind of stuff. There's no reason for him to be here. And yet he is. He's standing there in the rubble with them, and he says, look, I know that and he brings himself really into their problem, and then brings them along with him into the solution, which is what every good leader has to be able to do. He has to know what his people are dealing with and feeling. He has to be there. And one of the worst things is for a leader to stand apart, so far apart from his people that he has no finger on the pulse. He doesn't, he's tone deaf. And man, I can't tell you how many people I know in ministry and leadership in general who are tone deaf to the needs and the problems of their people. And they stand above them, and they don't have the financial issues that their people have. They don't have the personal issues and some of the things. And you hear them try and make up stories to make it sound like they do, but you could feel when they don't. And if you don't actually have experience with those things, people won't necessarily, ignore you because of that, but you can't act like you do, and if you have opportunity to sit down or get into the situation, you should do that. And so Nehemiah himself has no need to be there. He doesn't necessarily have the experiences of the people that he's leading, yet he does put himself into that situation on purpose and calls them to follow him, and he's going to help them with their problem. And so you have to be able to have that empathy with people, even if you don't have their experience. And if you have opportunity to put yourself into the experience, if at all possible. And then you call them to not stay there. And though you do feel for them, you want to bring them out. And so he does that. And as he said last week, they all cheered and like, let us do this. Let's get it done. They're all on board and they're ready to go. And all this good stuff starts happening in the end of chapter 2, and they begin to do this stuff, and they're all happy. Everybody's ready to go. And then you see he uses wisdom in placing people where they can do the best work, and each person is building basically close to their residence. So, in one thing, it keeps them from overtaxing themselves, from having to walk from one side of the city to the other to do work. Like most government things today seem to be that way, that you just unnecessarily go through all these hoops for no reason. And I know that mail here in Asheville, I don't know if it still does this, but it had been where anytime you get mail, even if it's from inside of Asheville, it went from Asheville to Greenville, then back to Asheville, and you're like, like for what purpose or what reason? And things like that, right? And government is not necessarily known for being efficient, but here, Nehemiah as a governor, he's efficient. He does these things for their benefit, and not only for the benefit of their energy levels, I guess you would say, but also for their ownership. They have to own part of it. And as we discussed that last week, because now they're not just building the city, they're building their home, their part of the city, their neighborhood. They're building the wall in their neighborhood. And so he's wise in that he does that. And inevitably, though, they begin to work and they meet these resistance points. And the first resistant point they're going to hit, where Nehemiah is going to have to show grit and not run away from the situation. Because one thing you can do, especially if you're like Nehemiah and you've stepped into a situation that you don't necessarily have to be in, you may have a tendency that when it gets difficult, you just want to hit the eject button and be like, you know what, guys, I'm going back to the palace. I'm going to go back and, carry that cup again. Or, man, I got this call. I got to take it. I got to get out of here. And you find, alternatives to leading in this particular situation because it's now become too difficult. And that's why I believe in the New Testament, Jesus talks about the hireling and the real shepherd, the true shepherd. And the true shepherd is not someone there because he's getting paid to do it, but because he has laid down his life for those sheep, for those people. His life is now tied to theirs, and their life is tied to his. And if it kills him, as it did in Jesus' case, he's willing to do that. That's what a good shepherd does. And so Nehemiah had every opportunity to just leave. He doesn't need to be there. He wasn't commanded to be there. God himself doesn't actually tell Nehemiah to go here. Nehemiah hears of the plight of his people, and he takes it to heart with empathy. He goes there and puts himself into their situation, and then he does not leave even though wave after wave after wave of resistance hits him. It's grit. It's the ability to take what's given to you, even when it's difficult and hard, and just keep pushing forward and using the resistance to push back against and almost to fuel you. And Nehemiah shows that in the word. In chapter 4, you're going to see that Sanballat and Tobiah, who are the two major leaders who are against him in this, right? And when you begin to do something great and lead, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it. In fact, it says that these two guys were extremely upset and that anybody would show up for the welfare of the people of Jerusalem. And so they are actively seeking ways to stop him. And in the beginning of their work, they're just kind of mocking it. They don't like it. It says, and when Sanballat heard that they're rebuilding the walls, he was furious and very indignant, and he mocked the Jews, and he was upset that anybody would show up and do this. And he begins to make fun of them and says, look, what are they going to do? Revive the stones from the heaps of rubble, he says. And Tobiah chimes in. He must be the second, kind of the second-hand man here, because he just kind of plays along with whatever Sanballat says. And he says, if a fox were to climb on the walls they build, it would just topple it over. And essentially saying, these guys, they're acting like they're doing something, but Nehemiah will never succeed. They've been here for how many years now? How many years ago did Cyrus send the first wave back and they haven't done anything yet? That place is a heap of ruin. The gates are burned, as Nehemiah's brethren told him, and all that good stuff. And they're at the same mindset, like, yeah, Nehemiah shows up and they're angry about it, but they're like, you know what? It's not going to matter. They're not going to succeed. They're not going to go anywhere. Nehemiah has one of his little, kind of personal prayers in the next verse here, verse 4, and verse 6 says, so we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half of its height. And so he hears the insults, he hears these external problems that are out here in chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, and they're scorning, they're mocking, they're making fun of, and Nehemiah simply just prays to God and keeps on trucking. And sometimes that's all you're going to be able to do. You're going to have people who are against you, people who don't care about you or actively want to stop you, and you will have no choice but simply to pray to God and keep your head down and keep walking. There won't be anything else to do. There will be no other avenues of escape except to quit and go home. And Nehemiah had that opportunity. He could have just left and gone home when they started to make these mockings and making fun of him and start to put up this resistance and this opposition to what God had basically blessed him so far in doing. And he could have just left. But he wasn't a hireling. He wasn't there to get paid for it. He was there because he loved these people. He loved his city. He wanted to see the work done. And so he pushes through regardless of the opposition that's coming against him here. So you have external problems every time. And remember, last week we had everybody's happy. Everybody's on board. Everybody's cheering. I'm like, yeah, let's get up and build this and do this good work. And even Nehemiah says they put their hands to this good work. They were sincere. They were genuine. They wanted to do the work. They weren't lying about it. They weren't acting with it, right? But as in all good works, if you're in a church, in a business, in a new opportunity, you're going to share your vision as best you can. And it's going to look at first like everybody is on board and ready to go. And they are, but it's not who's there with you when you make the speech. It's who's there with you when you open the door to the new building, or when you finally finish that new job, or you get to that new level that you've been trying to take your team to for so long. It's going to be who's actually there with you at the end. And in between those 2 points, there is a lot of friction and heat that burns away those who don't have the kind of grit we're talking about to stick it out. And so Sanballat, Tobiah, they're making fun of him, and Nehemiah just puts his head down, keeps on going. External problems. But not only are these external problems out there and that they're mocking them basically, but even down farther into chapter 6, verses 1 through 9, you have these conspiracies that Sanballat and Tobiah begin to work in the background because they can't seem to get Nehemiah to quit. And they try to call him out of Jerusalem to this secret meeting place. And where they can kind of discuss what they're doing, what options there are. I'm not really sure exactly what they thought they were selling to Nehemiah. It was very obvious they were just trying to take him out. And when they couldn't get him to come out, then they begin to have other conspiracies and things happen inside. And the one guy is related to people within the city. And there's all these things that are coming against Nehemiah, things he probably didn't expect when he went there. And they have these external problems that are coming in from the outside. And he has to choose, will I stick it out or will I leave and go home? Will I show grit or will I quit? Will I go home and cut this out? But not only does he have these external problems that are coming from outside and enemies, because though those things are difficult, those are also expected, right? We expect external, and especially within the church, we expect external resistance because Jesus says that. He says, you will have tribulation and problems in the world. You will experience that. And so we kind of expect external pressures. But what we don't expect sometimes is internal, or first I want to talk about personnel problems. Personnel. The personal problems of Nehemiah's personnel. In that it says, as well-meaning as everybody was, and everybody gets to work, and everybody's doing the work, and everybody's enthusiastic about it, as we spoke about last week. But there is the reality of the work, especially in ministry, especially with volunteers, if you do a volunteer organization or ministry or anything else. You can't just succeed or push through on this high that comes from the inevitable vision casting or opening Sunday or whatever it might be. There is the resistance that comes in the reality of the weight of the work. And that's what verse 10 in chapter 4 says. It says, Judah said, the strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish or trash that we are not able to build the wall. And so this big task, everybody's on board, everybody's enthusiastic, but eventually the actual work wears down. And they will look to the leader when they are tired and they are weary. And if you are a leader who stands afar off and you're aloft and you're not in touch with them, what you will begin to do is expect of them to just show up and do the work anyways because you're doing it for God. You know, we're talking about the church-wise. And as a business owner, you're like, well, you're getting paid for it, kind of thing. And I guess it's the same idea, you know, in the church world. It's like you're going to get paid for it one day in heaven. And as a business owner, you're like, you're going to get paid for it at the end of the week. But the reality is those things are not going to be good motivators when you're in the moment of pressure and bad things are happening over and over again. In this case, the work is so much work to do. It's so difficult and there's so much rubble and trash that it feels like you'll never get to the end of it. And no matter what happens in that situation, a person, whether volunteer or employee, is going to look to their leader for some sort of, again, empathy, some kind of feeling, some kind of understanding that, yes, I know that the work is difficult. I understand it. I'm actually down in here with you doing it, if it's at all possible and feasible for you to do that. And even to show some common burden there. And then find solutions that actually help the situation. A lot of times you can't necessarily take away the burden of work because it's just the burden of work. It's there. It needs to be done. But you see that Nehemiah is not tone deaf to their needs, because not only do they say that the work is so much, but we're also afraid. Verse 11 says, our adversaries say they will neither know nor hear anything until we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease. And so they're not only weary, but they're also afraid. And so Nehemiah puts his plan in place where they have people who are guarding and watching and making sure that people know that he is going to take care of them, that he cares about the struggles that they're dealing with, and he's doing whatever he can between him and the other nobles who are there to put up people in their place. And so They have external problems. They have personal problems. They have strength. The work itself is so great. And there's fear of what might happen if we keep going down this road. And the leader at that point needs to be strong and decisive and empathetic to the problems that are there and do whatever in his power is possible to make sure and ensure the safety, the well-being of his people. And if you're a leader who pushes his people through that like a taskmaster, like the Egyptians in the Old Testament, and when when the Israelites were in bondage, if you're like that and you're driving your people saying you have to do this because it's your job, you're not going to have a very good result, and you won't be seen as a very good leader, and you probably won't be in leadership for very long, because the external problems and the personnel problems are very real things. There are threats from outside, and my strength is not always able to stand up, and neither is the people that I lead. And I should be aware of that and take that into consideration. But not only that, not only is it our strength or the people's strength that fails here, and there's external problems, but there are also internal problems that Nehemiah has to push through. And when I say internal, I mean that there are people in the middle of everybody you're leading to this vision that you've cast in the beginning, who are not on board. And not only are they not on board, but they're actually causing more harm than good. And then some of the nobles, it says in verse 5 of chapter 3, did not put their shoulders to the work of their Lord. And so they didn't want anything to do with it. And, that causes issues with everybody else. When you have people under you who are supposed to be, say, pastors, leaders, project managers, supervisors, and they're always looking for the least amount of work to do, they are going to cause issues. They're going to cause problems. They're not going to enable you to do the best work that you possibly can do, and you're going to have to take care of it. And in chapter 3, he doesn't necessarily do anything, but later on, when he finds out that not only are they not on board with where he's going, but they're actually oppressing the people and exacting from them and exploiting the people, in that they are taking money, they're taking pledges, they are allowing these people to borrow on their land and even put up their sons and daughters for slavery to pay them their dues. They are wrecking the people emotionally, financially, and physically, and probably what chapter 5 all the way from verse 1 down to I think 12 or 13, what it's describing is probably the real reason why the walls in Jerusalem was in such a bad shape. The nobles had found comfortable places for them to live. And as long as they were okay, it was fine. And the people didn't really matter. And when Nehemiah finds out that they are taking advantage of their lesser brethren, as I guess they would have thought them to be, he takes them to task. He openly rebukes all of them in front of everybody and says, you can't do this. So basically he says, how dare you exploit your brethren in this place? We're all sitting here trying to do this work, and you're over here taking like this guy's daughter and son as a slave because he doesn't have any money left to pay you his debts. It's like, are you insane? Are you crazy? Do you not know what we're doing here? Do you not know that we are all the called people of God, and so on and so forth? And Nehemiah just does not let them live it down. And they say in verse 12, we will restore it. We will require nothing from them. We will do as you say. And he requires an oath of them. And I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, I'm pretty sure that their commitment here does not actually carry through. And this has to be reiterated later. They didn't actually do, they kind of said it when it was public and everybody was looking at them, but, they kind of went back to their old ways later on and still tried to exploit their brethren. And this is the kind of thing that happens when you try to move forward and all the vision is cast and everybody's on board. Like I said, you begin to hit these resistance points. People outside, which is understandable, you expect that. But then you have strength problems, which you probably expect that also. But internal issues like this, where no one seems to want to get on board, but not only do they not want to get on board, they also are doing things actively against the end goal. Or they're exploiting, as here these nobles were, they're exploiting their brothers and taking advantage of them. Say in a church, there's somebody on staff and they get paid to do a certain job. I mean, as church staff, you get paid to do certain things, and you're not doing those things, and you are just collecting a paycheck. Then you are like these people, because you're taking from those you're supposed to be serving, and yet you don't actually give back any service in return. And we've seen that lately with the way the government is, and for better or for worse, what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing. And we've seen that there are some civil servants doing the same thing, that they're just taking money and not actually accomplishing anything. And that happens in a church, it happens in government, it happens in businesses, it happens with supervisors and project managers who, in a project manager sense, there might be a guy who relies heavily on his supervisor on the job or on his people, and actually most of his work is actually given to them, and he just drives around a truck and doesn't do anything all day. And you see this anywhere. You'll see this. You'll see people who are given positions of power or responsibility, and they use it to exploit the people under them rather than to serve them. And serving is in everything, not just in ministry, but it should be in every form of leadership that you ever do. Servant leadership is the only kind of real leadership. And not only that, but he also has these secret informers. Chapter 6, verse 10 says that, afterward I came to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was a secret informer, and he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. And this is an attempt of character assassination, because if Nehemiah goes in there, which is what he says in verse 11, says, such a man as I flee. And essentially what he says throughout that verse is like, if I were to do what you say, they're not actually coming to kill me, number one. But number two, what you want me to do is go and run like I'm scared and hide in the temple, which is not proper in the first place, so that you can have a story to spin about me that I'm afraid and that I'm scared so much that I would lock myself in the temple to protect myself, which is an access point that most of the people would not have. And so they're trying to build this story they can spin on Nehemiah, that he is utilizing his access to protect himself while he allows everybody else kind of to get taken advantage of or to be killed by the adversaries and whatnot. And they're looking for a story. They're trying to assassinate his character. They've done everything else. They try to make him leave. They try to make him quit. They've mocked him. They've made fun of him. And they've done all these things. And finally, they're like, let's just assassinate his character, because if a leader cannot be stopped in any other capacity, what they're going to try and do is destroy the leader himself. And the easiest way to do that is to find some fault in his morals or his character, and say, look, he's not as good as you thought he was. And look at his failure here. And you see that all the time. I've seen people lately, so many people, too many people in the last couple years who led good, prosperous, I guess, fruitful, by a better word, ministries, and they get taken out by, generally speaking, sexual moral failures. But either that or money or embezzlement or not properly using the funds that they're given or whatever it might be. And same thing happens in businesses, and people are stealing money, or they're stealing time or not getting things done. And everywhere you go, you're going to find corruption in leadership. And a good leader, he may do a lot of good things right, but if you allow your integrity to be for sale, or you allow your morality to be compromised in a situation like this, even though it kind of made sense, but Nehemiah had enough mind about him, enough grit inside of him, one, to not make him afraid, but enough wisdom in him to realize this is a ploy, this is a trick, this is not right. He saw it coming from a mile away, and he says, look, man, I ain't going in there. So such a man as I flee, he has this air of manhood to him too. He's like, I'm not doing this. I'm a man. I'm not scared. I'm not going to do this. I'm a leader. And if I were to do this, I would be talked about, and you would destroy my character, bring me down, and cause all this good work to cease. As he told them in the beginning of chapter 6, I can't come down. I'm doing a good work, man. Leave me alone. We're going to get this done. I got things to do. And I'm not going to let anything deter me from what we are doing here. And he showed grit and determination and didn't allow the externals, the personnel, or the internal problems divert him from the good work that he was doing. He put his hand to it. And verse 3 basically sums up his attitude, his mindset. I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? You have to have that kind of mindset, that what you're doing is good. That is great. He says, I'm doing a great work. It's like, I don't have time to do this. I ain't got time to mess with your petty little differences and your problems and all this other stuff. I'm doing something and it's great and I cannot leave it until it is done. He would not leave. He had grit, determination, resilience. Everything they tried to hit him with, he found a way around it and he kept on going and the walls were rebuilt. You have to have empathy. You have to have wisdom. You have to have grit. You have to have vision. You have to be the one who, though you understand the problems your people are going through, you also call them out of it to something greater than themselves. And when they see that, and they see that you're not just up here saying you should do this, but you're actually reaching down to pull them with you so that they can succeed when you succeed, they're going to follow you. They're going to follow you, or you're going to have to call them out like you did to these nobles who wouldn't follow and wouldn't do what was right. But in every case, if you refuse to show buy-in on your end, which is really what he's showing here, not just that he bought in the beginning, but he's bought in truly. He really was bought in. And he went all the way, even through things and even enduring things that he really had no business enduring because he didn't need to be there. And that's the difference between, as I said, the hireling and the shepherd and the real leader and someone who's just there to collect the paycheck. You have to show grit. And when you do that, you irrevocably gain the trust of your people. And they'll never leave you if you do this. If you show this kind of determination, where you don't just throw vision out there, but in the thick of the resistance, you say, I'm doing a good work, I'm not leaving, and I'm sticking to it. And you guys can sit out there in the desert and sing your songs and make fun of me all you want. But this wall is getting built, and you can't do anything about it. That's the kind of attitude, the mindset a real leader has. That's today's For Real Life and Godliness podcast, the podcast that puts the Word of God, just like Nehemiah, down in the grit of where we live so that we can actually do something about it and pursue the calling that God has given us to do. I think this will probably be the last part of leadership, and we'll get into some new stuff following this. Lord willing, I stick to it and show grit and don't quit and all that good stuff. But if you watch this on YouTube, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share with somebody else, because if it helped you, it'll probably help someone else. If you're on Spotify or Apple, go ahead and rate us highly. If you didn't like what you heard today, just tell me personally, and I will do what I can to change that if I need to change. I can take constructive criticism, or criticism in general, is what it is. People always have something to say, and that's another part of leadership. You just got to learn that too. You just got to take it all the same. Praise, criticism, anything else. If you just take it all the same and you just keep on steaming through it like an old steam train, just keep on going. I don't even know what that is, a steam train. That's not even the right word. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. I'm running out of words. Like I said, I don't feel great. So anyways, point is, take it all the same, keep on going, get the job done. You show grit, your people will show loyalty, they'll show greater strength and greater work than they even knew they were capable of. But it all rests on the shoulder of the leader and what he does with the opposition that's thrown at him, and whether he can take opposition as opportunity or an option to leave. So that's today's For Real Life and Godliness podcast, the last part of our series and leadership, taken from mainly the story of Nehemiah. We'll see you guys next time.